in a place with the concept of a hospital where you go and then you spend time and you focus on intensive healing. Except for, unlike a hospital where you leave and you have to recover, what if you could go to this place, be immersed in nature, be immersed in a healing environment, and fully focus on maximizing neuroplasticity in order to fundamentally change neurological defaults that keep you stuck in a pattern of stress, in a pattern of reactivity, in a pattern of dis-ease. What would that place look like? What would you call that place? Well, we discovered this place 2 years ago after my family took a trip to the Dominican Republic, and we drove up a mile-long driveway out into the jungle. And the first time we step foot on this property, all you can hear is birds and the waterfall. And for the first time, over the course since the beginning of the pandemic, it was the first time I could take a breath in. 2 months later, we spent our life savings to purchase this place, to better understand God's perfect design and healing, in order to provide a place for people to reconnect, regain their movement, regain their resilience, and regain their energy. A place to change your health, and then research to change healthcare. What would you call that place? Call that place Symmetry Oasis. A place where you can live abundantly and then be the change in the world through better health.
My name is Dr. Drew Ronchak. I'm a doctor of chiropractic. Our clinic has remained open since the beginning of this pandemic in order to serve the health and well-being of our patients. On January 28th, 2022, Washington State Department of Health filed accusations of moral turpitude against me by illegally advocating for my patients' health according to the oath I took when I became a doctor.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, our team has performed over 86,000 chiropractic adjustments. Of those, we've had hundreds of patients recover from COVID and obtain natural immunity. And not one of our patients has died of COVID, yet hundreds of our patients have suffered irreparable harm from stay-at-home orders, social distancing, masking, and vaccine mandates. Forcing people to do something against their will when it's known to cause harm isn't protection. What we've been indoctrinated to believe is not healthcare. In 1903, Thomas Edison declared, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease." The future is now. It's time to wake up and live. So I was a little bit of a rebel in Washington State, the most mandate-intensive state in the nation. And so what Symmetry Races was to me was a rebel recovery. And according to what is this? The Rebel Rocker and August 4th, 2005. A rebel is a person who stands up for their own personal opinions, despite what anyone else says. A true rebel stands up for what they believe is right, not against what's right. It's not about smoking crack, drinking until you're rendered unconscious, or beating the crap out of anyone that crosses your path. It's all about being an individual and refusing to follow a crowd that forces you to think the same way that they do, even if it means becoming an outcast to society. True rebels know who they are and do not compromise their individuality or personal opinion for anyone. They're straightforward and honest, and they will sure as hell tell it like it is. So if you find yourself in this position, needing recovery, you're not alone. I'm right with you. Or if you find yourself in a position where you need a kick in the butt, because this is my younger brother, Davis. And Davis, he served in our military for 8 years. And then when he got out of the military, he suffered from PTSD. And he spent the next 8 years, gained 87 pounds, and lived at home with our dad and was largely unemployed. And so Davis and my story became intertwined because when we bought this property, I was still in Washington State. And so I asked Davis if he was really actually happy in his life, this vicious life of addiction to food and alcohol and unemployment. And he said, no. I was like, all right, man, we'll get your passport. We're sending you on an adventure. And we sent him out to the Dominican Republic to live in the jungle, immersed in nature. And the simple truth is that you have the power inside of you to experience whatever it is that you desire to experience as far as health, relationships, and movement in your life. And when I say this, I mean our brain actually literally creates power. Our brain is a generator. It takes glucose and then through metabolism converts it into electricity. And up to this point in my life, before the pandemic, I had a phrase where I've got all the time in the world, but I've got zero time for BS. And at this point, I mean, the pandemic loaded me up with BS because before the pandemic, I was the president of multiple nonprofit organizations. I had served on multiple boards. I raised money for, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars for other nonprofits. We helped renovate a community center. We helped build a splash pad. We helped build a park in Arlington. And then I don't know about you, but it's just like ever since 2020, I just inundated with bullshit. And that pretty much brought me to my breaking point, and my health was compromised. My blood pressure was out of control. I was aggressive. I was reactive. I was snapping at my friends, snapping at my family. I yelled at my staff. And the reason is neurologically, what had happened is I had overactivated what's called the amygdala, or the warrior mode within the brain. And this part of the brain is what controls the fight, flight, freeze part of our brain. And this, I mean, it is warrior. It is ready to fight always. And so what happens is this is where our power gets lost. So our thoughts drain our power. It overactivates that amygdala, and then it traps this energy in our body. You ever have something on your mind that's just like frustrating, and at the end of the day, you really didn't do a whole lot, but it just exhausted you in the process? Or you have a day where you're stuck at a computer. Trauma, the sitting is hands down the most traumatic thing that our body can go through on a regular basis, because as was already decided and discussed at nausea, that sitting is the new smoking. So it has this neurological traumatic effect on the body, where our body then flexes around it and forms this guarded state and exhausts us. And then technology, I mean, gosh, how many hours you can spend just looking down the phone, just going through endless scrolling. And all of this power loss is based on the adrenaline, dopamine recirculation process, because all these fight or flight things, that's adrenaline fueling us, and which is kind of a toxic uh, set of chemicals that enters into our body. There's adrenaline, you have epinephrine, cortisol, and it's kind of like a dirty energy. It's good and it's powerful, but it's dirty, and it's that fight or flight response. Dopamine is energy that's based on the reward system. So when you are having connection with somebody, or moving your body, or creating something, that's producing dopamine, which is more of the clean energy. So what happens is our power source comes from our adrenaline response because of the amygdala, but then it's trapped in our body within our thoughts, our traumas, our toxins, and with this inundation of technology. And then the dopamine system just gets weaker. So we don't end up with that good, clean energy. And so how we recycle this energy process is by activating the prefrontal cortex. It's kind of known as like the Gardner mode within our brain. So the Gardner is the advanced part of our brain that takes care of everything. So you have a pattern that's not needed anymore, like this, a memory back in childhood that doesn't really serve you anymore. The Gardner cleans it up. Yeah, it doesn't. You had toilet paper stuck on your shoe, and your brain says, "I don't need to remember that. Get rid of it." And this mode is what helps us rest, what's helped us digest, and then what helps us develop. And when I say develop, what I mean is really upgrade, because when a child develops, they move from one stage of life to the next. So for example, a normal development would be from sitting to standing, from to lifting the head to rolling over, to from rolling over to crawling. Developmentally, that's what the prefrontal cortex, or the Gardner mode, does. It helps us to advance to the next stage of life. And then we kind of stop talking about it, though, after childhood, right? They have all these developmental standards, which incidentally have just gotten moved back following the pandemic, which you'll understand by the end of this presentation why that is. So this Gardner mode is what pretty much cleans up after the warrior mode. And then what it leads to is adaptation, which equals more power. And so adaptation is the ability to then get stronger. Healing is adaptation. If you tear down a muscle and it rebuilds, it gets stronger. If it tear down a muscle and it heals, it gets stronger. If you tear down a muscle and it adapts, it gets stronger. It's all the same word. It's synonymous. Healing is adaptation. If you do something difficult and you did not get stronger, it's because you did not heal. So the way to kind of complete the cycle is a couple of ways. To get unstuck, get moving. That recycles the energy from the amygdala. The bitter receptors also does it. So eating something that is sour stimulates the prefrontal cortex. It's one of the primitive reflexes that are within our nervous system from when we were babies. Because when you're a baby, you discover everything by putting it in your mouth. So you put something bitter in your mouth that's poisonous, then you have an immune response and the digestive response and this cascade of white blood cells, which is also why traditionally there was a salad before a main meal, and it typically was bitter salads, because if you have something bitter before you eat your main meal, it actually begins digestion, so you have a reduction of 25% calories. Same with drinking alcohol, same with having cocktail hour before a main meal. And it's also why one of the main basis for many of the medicines early on in medicine was alcohol. That was the main basis. So that really the things they put in it didn't really have benefits, most likely the bitterness from the whiskey. And so adaptation is the response that takes intentional time and repetition. And the reason is because that we have this inundation of thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So what happens is we end up getting kind of lost. And this is not anyone's fault, other than kind of like it's saying, okay, I want to have better health. I want to have better focus. I want a better energy. I want a better connection. I want to move better. I want to play with my kids. I want to do all these things. But then it's like, well, how do I get there? Well, which way is better? Imagine getting in your car and you want to go drive somewhere and you don't have a map and you kind of know where you're going, but you don't really know exactly where it is. Like, what are the odds of getting there? It's pretty minimal. And so really the way you develop trust in the process is by having tools that give you feedback. And so really what we found is there is 3 tools that you can lean on to best understand where this cycle is being completed, meaning the warrior mode and the gardener mode are working together hand in hand. And number 1 is thermography. It's the key performance indicator of symmetry within blood flow and lymphatic drainage. So blood flow isn't simply blood vessels all the way opened up, hose going, blood's going. There's within any given moment, our body is constricting and dilating, opening and closing blood flows. So you want to have good symmetry. So when blood flow is needed, for example, with exercise, you open up the blood flow. And when it's needed for healing, say, ligamentous structures, you want constriction or closing down of the blood flow. So thermography gives us the ability to measure that symmetry. The second one, and symmetry really means efficiency. The second one is surface electromyography. And this measures the symmetry within motor patterns, because the warrior mode has a very set group of muscles that go into contraction and guards. If you ever heard someone say, I hold my stress in my shoulders, that is the warrior muscles kicking into gear. So symmetry would be able to balance out the opposing muscle groups in order to be in erect position. And if you look at people as they get older, they slowly start to stoop forward. And it's not because they need to focus on their posture. It's because their posture is moving more towards that warrior mode posture because of asymmetry. So surface electromyography gives us the ability to measure that. And it also gives us a lot of insight into the cause of a lot of the exhaustion that people suffer with. And so then, and imbalances, of course. And then we have heart rate variability. And this gives us, it's a gold standard measurement for 2 main pieces of neuroanatomy, prefrontal cortex and the vagus nerve. So the prefrontal cortex is that gardener part of the brain that clean it up, develop, rest, digest. And then the vagus nerve is basically the nerve that sends the signals to the body so you can feel at ease. And so this measures symmetry between the ability to get revved up and get excited and then rev down and calm yourself down. And a good example of a baby that would be out of symmetry in this scan would be indicative of is a baby with colic. They can't rev their body down, so they cry all the time. And usually what it has to do with is either a stressful pregnancy affecting the prefrontal cortex or the birth trauma affecting the vagus nerve. So really the trust in the process comes from getting tools in order to then have instruments that then let you know that you're going in the right direction for whatever your goal is. And so that leads us to the environment of healing. So I had pushed my warrior mode so much to the point where your neuroanatomy cries for 3 responses if you're in a perceived hospitable environment. Either A, you migrate, or you adapt, or you die. And many of the chronic illness issues that we have in the United States are due to vagus shutdown because of this self-suicide that happens from being stuck in the warrior mode for so long. And so if to understand this process and why we get so out of whack, look back to like the earliest first chapter of the Bible, like Genesis, and it says, in the beginning of the time, we were in perfect commune in the Garden of Eden with God, right? So in nature is where our species as humans existed for 300,000 years. And that's where we are meant to have perfect balance between the warrior and the gardener. And Dr. Bruce Lipton says you can't be in growth mode and protection mode at the same time. So you can't have the warrior on and the gardener going at the same time. They take turns back and forth. And in being in Symmetry Oasis, you feel this. From the moment you walk in, you feel everything just peace and ease. And so then if we break down the cycle, this is what it looks like. It looks like decreasing the noise from the amygdala and then stimulating the prefrontal cortex via the vagus nerve, and then deciding to trust in the process. Because here's what ends up happening sometimes. Let's say working out is good for you. Let's say you've never been in shape though, and you go to the gym, it's good for you, and you work out, and you get a trainer, and they work you really hard, and then you wake up the next day. How do you feel? You feel bad. You feel beat up. You feel awful, right? So if you did not trust in that process, then what would happen is like, I'm going to take some time off from the gym, and I'll go back in a little bit when I feel better. And then you do it again. How do you feel again? You feel awful. How do you feel again? You feel awful. And then that's where we get these conversations where people say, I did that. I tried that. It didn't really work. Oh, I was worse than when I was before. But really, I've been caring for people for over a decade, hundreds of thousands of visits. The process works. The instrumentation does not mislead. It is right on 100% of the time. You take someone's temperature. That is a direct measurement of the thermoregulation, and the scans work the same exact way. And by repeating the cycle with repetition, you create symmetry within your nervous system, the ability to switch back and forth between the amygdala, warrior, and the gardener. And so then the question comes down to is, where would you rather be? Would you rather be in a status of rigor mortis, meaning your body is shut down, stiff, tight, guarded, and slowly dying and shutting down? Or would you rather have vigorous amounts of energy? Because there's an acronym to understand if you are healing. It's, are you happy? Look at your kids. Are your kids generally happy? Are they energized? Do they run? Do they play? Are you living in alignment? I mean, the pandemic kind of demonstrated this, is how many people wore a mask or received a vaccination or shut down their business or stayed at home because they, quote unquote, had to, not because they chose to. Like, how many things are you doing in your life that you have to versus that you choose to? And then with that, are you feeling light? I kind of demonize the warrior part of the brain quite a bit in my communication because it becomes so automatically stronger. So it's really, we're trying to encourage the gardener to kick into gear. But really, the last part is like, are you light? Because when you have good symmetry, hard things aren't so heavy. And then repeating the cycle, what happens is you then get a balance between the dopamine system and the adrenaline system. So a couple quick quizzes. If you go and like, okay, I'm happy as long as I have my drink. I'm happy as long as I can get my time on my phone. I'm happy as long as I, do XYZ, sit around, right? Most likely are not in a healthy place. You're most likely depending on the addiction cycle in order to get your dopamine fix. That's not the same as when I talk about happy, energized, aligned, and light. So when we moved from Bacchus to Oasis, we moved down there and we lived in the jungles for almost a year, and then go into villages and provide free pickup care for hundreds of people. And kids would just come and grab their friends and get adjusted. And look at the pure commitment in this group. Kids that live in poverty, have very little, they have joy. And that's the goal. The goal is to have joy and balance in life. And balance is simply symmetry. Davis, after being down with us for a couple months, lost 57 pounds, where he was unemployed and living at home with my dad and living off of them. By the time he got back, he had an interview set up with Amazon. When he got back the very first week, he interviewed with them. He got a $3,000 signing bonus, got a job. Within 2 months, he had his own apartment, had his own car. It's never too late for anyone if you can provide the optimal environment to regain symmetry. So the question is, what do you want to do? You want to stay where you are and then continue to say, well, I hate to say it, but this is the way I am. Or do you want to regain control of your power, get your power back, cut out the BS, regain symmetry, regain strength, and be able to say when something's not in line with your values and you have to challenge it, challenge accepted. So this video is really a beginning conversation piece to see if we are going to be a good help for you. And so this book right here is the book that I wrote out the entire experience from purchasing Symmetry Oasis to multiple people going down there and healing now, and all of the things within nature that can be implemented right now in order to start to optimize that vagus nerve and that Gardner part of the brain. So if you'd like to learn more, take the moment, scan the screen, get your own copy of A Rebel's Guide to Post-Pandemic Health Revolution. And if you're ready to then take the next step, whether that is coming into one of the Symmetry Chiropractic Mission Centers to begin chiropractic care, or coming out to Symmetry Oasis for a neuro-intensive chiropractic experience, then send us an email at info@litup.global and we take the next step. You're the boss. We're simply here to be a guide. I burned myself out because I thought I knew how to do it myself. And I thought that fighting was the right way forward. But really, the amygdala brain is the dumb part of our brain. The fighter part of our brain is the dumb part of our brain. Once I was able to figure out how to engage my prefrontal cortex, I realized that I don't have to fight. By simply taking back control of my health, I was able to take back control of my life.